continues to be crazy, so we have to bring in our Hall of Famer, David Aldridge, to get the latest scoop on what's going on. So, DA, what does this mean for Toronto? And number one, what does this mean for Kawhi?
Well, look, Ro, I mean, I think it's a gamble. There's no doubt about that. I mean, you're taking a chance on a guy who has told you very specifically that he did not want to be traded to Toronto. And you're taking him anyway. Now, if you're the Raptors, you're saying, we think we have a chance with LeBron out of the East finally, the guy that's beat us 3 straight years in the playoffs and tormented us, to maybe break out of the East and get to the finals with a healthy Kawhi Leonard. And certainly you would put them on that top line with Philly and Boston with a healthy Kawhi Leonard. But the question is, what happens after this year? What happens if you don't make the finals? Now, they believe, the Raptors believe, they've got a lot of young talent on that team. They love the picks that they've brought in the last few years, Van Vliet and Wright, Siakam. They really think those guys, and Onanabe last year, are ready to take a big step. They may have to if Kawhi leaves and you wind up trading DeMar DeRozan essentially for nothing, or for a guy that's only going to be there for a year. But it's a gamble that they're willing to take because the East is that open next year.
Yes, a major gamble indeed. So let's move to the other side. Looking at San Antonio, you have DeMar DeRozan, who recently re-upped with Toronto, goes in the press conference, declares that he is Toronto, wants to be there. The first player that they drafted that actually re-signs with the Raptors. Now he goes to San Antonio, and he appears to be a little bit in his feelings about everything that's going on.
Well, look, DeMar has been very upfront over the last year about his own issues with mental health and depression and things like that. And, you know, he wears his heart on his sleeve. As you mentioned, he really repped Toronto honestly and forthrightly for 9 years. I mean, all you heard before DeMar DeRozan got there was about people who didn't want to be in Toronto, didn't want to play for Toronto long term. Well, this was a guy that was drafted there from Los Angeles, never expressed any desire than anything other than remaining in Toronto for his whole career. He didn't even take a visit when he was a free agent a couple of years ago, Ro. He signed that big contract, the extension right away, and wanted to be a Raptor for life. And, you know, if you look at his Instagram post this morning, they back up what we have all been reporting, is that he is very upset about this trade. He feels like the Raptors lied to him. You know, he and his representatives talked with them last week in Las Vegas, and what they are saying is they were assured he wasn't going to be dealt. Now, look, things change. We understand that. But he's not taking it very well right now.
So it seems like we've seen this before. A player that is an all-star who's from the Southern California area who wants to sign with the Los Angeles Lakers. So going back to Kawhi, we seem to have seen this with Paul George before. He ends up getting traded to Oklahoma City, falls in love with the culture there, ends up re-signing. So is there a chance that Kawhi could possibly end up staying with the Raptors? You see that happening in any scenario?
Well, look, Ro, I've learned, I'm old enough to know that you never say never, right? So it would be silly for me to say that the Raptors have no chance to re-sign Kawhi Leonard. If they do run the table, if they do get to the NBA Finals, and he plays a big role in that, and they're successful, and he bonds immediately with Kyle Lowry and some of the other players there. Look, anything can happen. What I'm telling you today, in the middle of July, is he didn't want to go there. He doesn't want to pay the taxes that he's going to have to pay there. And, I mean, that's a real thing, you know, for players. It's that, you know, he was coming from a state with no state income tax to a place that taxes you pretty liberally. So that's a factor. And, you know, that was not a place he wanted to go. I can tell you that even though he didn't want to go to L.A., and he preferred the Lakers, but he would have been okay with the Clippers, from what I'm told, he would have given Philly a fair look. You know, it's no guarantee that they would have been able to re-sign him either, but he felt a lot more comfortable at least giving Philadelphia a real fair shot, especially given that Brett Brown is the coach there and he knows him from San Antonio. So that is not as big a case in Toronto. But you've got to give Masai Ujiri, Nick Nurse, the new coach, the players, the staff, the organization, a chance to make their impression on him, and we'll see what happens. But right now, he is not inclined to stay there.
Yes, we definitely will see what happens. DA, thanks for joining us, but stay close. We might have you come back just in case something else happens. Thanks. Definitely, we got to take it to another level right now as we welcome in our front office expert, a basketball savant, David Griffin, on the line. Griff, you there?
Bro, what's going on, man?
Hey, you know
I don't know about basketball savant. That's a little strong.
Well, you know exactly what's going on. What were your first thoughts when you hear this news drop this morning?
Yeah, I was really surprised, actually, that San Antonio made the deal in the fashion they did. I thought with USA Basketball getting ready to begin, they would let Kawhi be there and prove that he's healthy. I think the offers would have been significantly better had he been healthy. And so I think if there was a window of opportunity for him to showcase that, I think they probably could have leaned on him a little bit to say, listen, we're not getting the kind of packages we want from the kind of places you want to go. Help us help you. And I'm just surprised that they acted when they did.
And Griff, with the timing of now Kawhi saying he will participate in USA B basketball, was that a way to let the rest of the teams know that I'm healthy, I'm willing to show you guys I'm ready to play if you want to make a move for me?
Well, I think it was, and I think it certainly would have helped. I think anytime you're trying to put together a Godfather-type package to get a superstar player, you want to at least know that all the assets you're putting in the center of the table are being put there in pursuit of a healthy player who's capable of playing at the star level he once did. So I think it would have had a profound impact on the quality of offers that San Antonio was receiving.
And Griff, you've been in that chair before, obviously. Take us through what Masai is thinking, that I want to take a chance on this, knowing Kawhi may not be totally happy with this move. But on the flip side, if I get him here, I bring him to Toronto, I show him our culture, maybe we change his mind.
Well, I've never been in a situation where a player's expressed a lack of interest in coming immediately. You know, we had a situation where we took a gamble on Kevin Love, and he had the ability to leave us after 1 year. And we were very confident that being part of what we were building in Cleveland, trying to win a championship, would speak to Kevin over time, and fortunately it did. I think Oklahoma City's success in keeping Paul George sort of emboldened Masai and Bobby Webster to believe that they could sell their environment to Kawhi, and I get that, I really do. I think this is almost a no-lose situation for Toronto, because it's a really big gamble on the one hand, but they'd sort of run aground and they weren't as good as they wanted to be in the Eastern Conference with the mix they had. DeMar's owed a great deal of money, and in the playoffs had not played to the level of that contract. So in a way, if Kawhi was not happy, they would know that and they'd have a better feel for it by trade deadline. I think they could potentially flip Kawhi again for more than they're giving up if cap flexibility mattered to Toronto after this season, and I think it probably does. So I like this gamble by Masai quite a bit regardless. It doesn't even matter to me if Kawhi says, I will stay. I don't think that's the only thing that makes this a successful deal. I think they wanted to reset the deck a little bit, and getting off of DeMar's money might be part of doing that. And if Kawhi stays, this is just truly beyond a home run deal for Masai and Bobby.
Now you see why Roe called you a savant. You see, you just took it to another level for us to explain to the people at home that this is a smart move for Masai. See what I mean? Thank you, Griff.
Oh, man. Griff,
I get lucky once in a while.
Griff, before we get you out of here, I have to ask you this. So you mentioned an unhappy player in Kawhi Leonard. So you go from one disgruntled wing leaving San Antonio to another entering San Antonio and DeMar DeRozan. So what are the chances DeRozan actually sticks around in San Antonio?
You know, I think, again, this is a situation, I try to be mindful at times like this, that R.C. Buford is infinitely better at his job than I've ever been. So I believe there's a plan here, and it could also be part of perhaps flipping DeMar DeRozan. There's a potential for that as well. I think he goes from a situation, and you guys just mentioned this about Kawhi, he goes from a situation where he was paying incredibly high taxes to a place with no state income tax. That might get comforting to him over time.
Of course, it's all about the money at the end of the day. At least that's what I've heard. Hey, Griff, thanks for taking time to join us. Now we are joined by the legend, the man that was responsible for constructing the Toronto Raptors franchise as an owner, front office exec, and head coach, the Hall of Famer Isaiah Thomas. Zeke, when you heard this news, what were your first thoughts?
My first thoughts were wow. And I say wow because, you know, with LeBron James leaving the East, he was the Toronto killer. He was the person, in my opinion, that really stopped the Raptors from advancing single-handedly. Now that he's in the West, you had to look at this Raptors team with all of their playoff experience, with the DeRozan, with the East being kind of down this year or kind of up in the air because there's no LeBron James. Toronto, you would have thought that they would be one of the favorites to come out of the East this year. And to make this move, you're looking at a Kawhi Leonard and a Danny Green that if they come and they put their heart and soul into the franchise as DeRozan did, then they still are the favorite to come out of the East. But if Kawhi's heart and soul is not into being a Toronto Raptor, then it could be a long season for the Raptors.
And Zeke, I want to go into your GM mind right now. If you're Pop or Masai Ujiri, how are you making Kawhi and DeMar DeRozan feel good about themselves to feel, to your point you just made, that they want to play good basketball and buy all the way in?
Well, there's two parts to this. There's an economical part, and then there's a playing on the field part, a playing on the floor. So when you look at the economics of it, and if you're Toronto, you're saying, okay, I've made the decision that I'm going to have a one-year rental in Kawhi Leonard, and I don't believe in my team anymore. So this speeds up the rebuild process because I think all of us know that Kawhi is 70% a Laker right now in his heart. If you're San Antonio, you're saying, okay, I don't want to make the Lakers better. I don't want to make a team in the West better. So the best thing I can do is move, you know, the star player to the East. You're getting an all-star back in DeRozan. He's 3 years, 3 years still under contract. So you have stability if you can get DeRozan to buy into the Spurs way. So economically and playing-wise, that's how I view those two situations.
So, Zeke, I have to ask you this. You're very familiar with Toronto and how things work in Canada. Is there any scenario in which Kawhi gets comfortable there and stays past this one season?
Well, we all thought that Paul George would never be comfortable in OKC, and it worked out. So, you know, there's always a chance. However, I say that, you know, I think the thing to watch this upcoming season is, and even maybe before the season starts, does Toronto now make a trade with the Lakers? Does Toronto accept the Laker package that was put on the table with all the young players, all the draft picks? You know, so this puts the Lakers right back in the mix as a potential trade partner with the Raptors. And if you're looking at the Raptors from a rebuild or a startup, you know, they've acquired, you know, the most valuable asset in terms of player in the free agent market for trades and potential to move to make their team better. So it's a win-win for Masai and the Raptors, either way you look at it. If you're trying to get him to buy in and win the championship, or you're looking to trade him for more valuable players.
Great points made there. Apparently, Masai Ujiri keeping all those options open, doing a great job as the president of the Raptors. Hey, Zeke, thanks for joining us.
Hey, you're welcome, and good luck, you guys.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
Very unbelievable. And this is the social media post I spoke about. Be told one thing and the outcome is another. Can't trust them. Ain't no loyalty in this game. Wow. This deal being made by the Spurs and the Raptors, from the Spurs' perspective, what are your thoughts?
I think it's a curious move. By the way, good afternoon to you guys. I'm learning a lot of new lyrics to rap songs. Thanks, Ro. It's 3D and I talked about this when the news of Kawhi potentially being traded and all the things that were transpiring between the organization and Kawhi's group. And 3D and I really hit on this point, Ro, and that is for the way that Coach Pop and RC have handled the organization over the course of their time there. There's been a lot said, and I was very fortunate to be part of this experience, about there's no one player that's greater than the team. What I think would have been really difficult to swallow for all the years that Pop and RC have done this is for them to have extended Kawhi Leonard to that max contract, given all the years that Tim Duncan sacrificed money, Manu Ginobili sacrificed money. All of the times we've heard Pop talk about how he's built the culture and what he believes in, to reward Kawhi Leonard in that way, given what the franchise had to deal with over the past year with the grumblings and the back and forth and not stepping up and doing your job, that would have been the curious thing. So I'm not surprised that San Antonio didn't, go all the way in. They obviously extended their hand to try to make this relationship something that they could repair. And at some point, they're going to make the decision, and 3D knows this, that their basketball team is bigger than any one of their players. And I think that that's why we got to this point where a trade was going to happen. Now, I think a lot of us are surprised that it's Toronto. We thought, Lakers, Clippers, and maybe Philly sliding in. It's a curious move. It's a bold move by Masai Ujiri to do what he's done. But the Spurs were ready to move on. And interesting the way they're going to go about their rebuild, adding another mid-range shooter to a team that, has moved off the three-point line and now has some more versatility in a stud in DeMar DeRozan.
And with that being said, Bones, how does Pop and the brass change his thinking, knowing he's upset that the Raptors said they weren't going to trade him out in Vegas, then he does get traded? How does that system change his mind and make him feel welcomed?
Well, you and I know this. 3D time will help that out. It's still, we're talking July. We've got a couple of months still before guys are going to get themselves to the cities where they're about to play and begin training camp. There's always a lot of hurt feelings, and as a player, you always take a trade. Your perspective on those trades become a lot different as you get older. And I know DeMar's talking a lot about loyalty and about promises. Look, we understand loyalty for a player should always be about the game. That's it. You want somebody in your corner. You want to believe in the franchise and the organization. But when it comes down to it, you've got to believe in what it is you bring to the game. And DeMar will get back to that, I think, very, very quickly. The interesting one, 3D and Ro, is Kawhi going to Toronto. This is Nick Nurse's first full-time head coaching NBA job. What is he going to do with that team that, last year pushed the envelope, tons of wins, has tons of expectations? How does Nick Nurse handle assimilating a guy like Kawhi Leonard into what they want to do systematically? That's going to be an interesting thing that their training camp, coming out of training camp, how it is that they play and the approach of Kawhi Leonard.
So you have DeMar DeRozan, who's played at an all-star level in the Eastern Conference, but in some opinions, he hasn't met expectations in the postseason. So now going to San Antonio, do you think that he can live up to those expectations? And is he the type of player that can fit in Pop's system, as he's been more looked at as an ISO player in the Eastern Conference?
Hey, Ro, if you want to play for Pop, you better fit into the system. or you're not going to play. Absolutely, DeMar can do that. Look, the guy's been on the All-Star team for the past 5 years. He's averaged over 20 points the last 5 years in the Eastern Conference. Obviously beloved since he got to Toronto back in the 2009-10 season. DeMar will figure this out, and San Antonio will find ways to use him, and they will be effective. Look, the team won 47 games last year with Kawhi just suiting up for 9 of those. You add DeMar DeRozan in his prime. You add Poeltl, a very capable big man that they think could probably do a lot of switching on the perimeter and still guard an area that has a lot of room to grow, a great prospect out of Utah. And then you have some flexibility with the draft choice. I know Masai did a great job of protecting that 2019 pick 1 through 20. And I think it turns into a couple second-rounders if that doesn't happen for San Antonio. But this team, San Antonio, will find ways to still be competitive, and they didn't want to give up on that by bringing in DeMar DeRozan at this point in his career and the security of those 3 years. Now, whether he stays there or not, I'm with Griff. Who knows? But for right now, I think it's the deal that San Antonio sort of had to make, and nobody stepped up with a better offer given their question marks about Kawhi Leonard and his health.
And with that question mark, Bones, let's say Kawhi and Masai Ujiri have the right conversation, he buys all the way in. So when you bring he and Danny Green into the situation, 2 champions, when you look at that roster, you say, wow, if all these guys buy in, this Eastern Conference could be wide open. Maybe this team could get back to the top again.
Oh, 3D. Their roster is legit. You got their best player is Kyle Lowry. I know DeMar DeRozan is the favorite in Toronto, but Kyle over the past couple seasons has been their most important and most valuable player. You're going to have Danny Green, who's played 100 playoff games, step into that role with C.J. Miles behind him. Great veterans and guys who can pull the trigger from the three-point line. Kawhi Leonard potentially starting at the 3, Serge Ibaka at the 4, Valanciunas at the 5. And then all that bench unit last year that came in and had massive impact. Fred VanVleet, OG. They're going to be at Pascal Siakam. They're going to have a very complete roster, 3D, and it's going to be exciting, again, just to see how quickly and how much Kawhi Leonard impacts what Toronto can do and be about for next season.
Of course, the big bombshell dropped. Now, we have to wonder, what does this mean when you move your all-time leading scorer to San Antonio and you get Kawhi Leonard in return?
Well, you're getting arguably one of the top 5 talents in the NBA, but probably only for a year at the most. It's you're moving a guy, DeMar DeRozan, who professed to want to play his entire career in Toronto. He more than any other Raptor, and I've covered the team since day one, accepted the responsibility of being the face of the franchise, the city, and the country. I think there are mixed signals out there right now about what this means for Masai Ujiri's willingness to pull the trigger, obviously, on a major trade, and what the long-term implications are. It's a big gamble, but, every trade is. And is Kawhi Leonard now the best player in the Eastern Conference? I think you can make that case if he's healthy as he was in a year and a half ago.
Well, you mentioned long-term right there, but what about short-term? Let's look forward to next season. Is Toronto now the team to beat in the Eastern Conference?
If you could start Kyle Lowry, Danny Green, Kawhi Leonard, OG Anunoby, and Jonas Valanciunas and bring off the bench Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, C.J. Miles, DeLon Wright, and Serge Ibaka, you're pretty good. And in the Cleveland Free Eastern Conference, I think you're absolutely as good as Philadelphia and Boston and Indiana.
So going back to long-term, you mentioned Masai Ujiri. So what are the chances that he could keep Kawhi Leonard here past this one season?
I think they're probably remote. Everything that anybody's heard is that Kawhi has designs on going to live and play in Los Angeles. But this does sort of, if it is only 1 year and it doesn't work out, it sort of hastens any kind of rebuild that Masai's got in plans. He's constructed this team to have 2 more years with this group, with the formerly DeRozan, Ibaka, Valanciunas group. And this sort of moves up that process 1 year if it fails. Obviously, it's a gamble because the trades of players of this magnitude is a huge gamble, but the short-term implications are good. The long-term implications aren't all that much different because if in 2 years the Raptors weren't good, they were going to blow it up anyway. And this sort of moves that up a bit of a year.
Well, it's definitely a high risk. Hey, Doug Smith, thanks for joining us.